I'm going to talk a bit about what the 28th Infantry Division did during World War II, and then we'll focus on the Battle of the Bulge. But one of the missions that we have in the 28th Division Association is to tell the story of Pennsylvania's own division. And a lot of people don't know the story. They don't know what the origination was. They don't know where they fought. They don't know what they did. So a brief background on all of that, and then we'll focus on the Battle of the Bulge and a little bit of what they did after the Bulge, too. Let me set the stage for you here. When the Allies came ashore on the beaches of Normandy on June 6th, American, British, and Canadian forces faced an entrenched German defense. The Germans had plenty of opportunity and time to build up those defenses, and they were not really happy that someone was going to come across the beaches. It would take several grueling weeks of fighting in France before the Allies could break into the interior and force the Germans to withdraw. During those initial weeks, German forces held a tight perimeter around the Allied landing zones with notable military leaders, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery leading the 21st Army Group on the left, and American Omar Bradley commanding the forces on the right. Both commanders led repeated assaults against the German lines, attempting to break through the German defenses near the coast. Finally, at the end of July, General Bradley's forces managed to break through at Saint-Lô. This penetration of the German defenses forced the Germans to shift their troops, creating a vulnerability that allowed the British forces to break through as well. With both American and British forces advancing, high-speed pursuit of the Germans began, driving deeper into France and culminating in several critical battles where German forces were encircled and decimated, such as the battle at Mortain and the Battle of the Falaise Pocket, of which the 28th Division did participate in. After breaking free from the containment, the Allies began a rapid eastward advance across France. In a span of 4 weeks, the American forces covered 300 kilometers to reach Paris and the Seine River. At this point, the Germans withdrew to the opposite bank of the Seine, establishing it as a defensive line. The Allies paused to allow their logistics to catch up because of their rapid advance. This 4-week pause enabled the Allies to refuel and resupply before resuming their offensive operations. Once the Allies resumed this advance, German forces continued to retreat, now engaged in fighting withdrawals. In just 4 weeks, the Allies had reached the eastern parts of France, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and were approaching the heavily fortified Siegfried Line. Let's talk a little bit about the origins of the 28th Infantry Division. The division is the oldest sized division in the United States Army. Some of their elements can trace their lineage back to Ben Franklin's Associators, beginning in 1747, and one regiment, which later evolved into 109th Field Artillery Battalion, furnished 3 companies of the Continental Army, Washington's only regular force in the War in American Independence. The division was officially established on 12 March 1879 and was later designated the 28th Keystone Division in 1917 after their entry into World War I. The division was thrown into battle without quiet sector training to face the seasoned Ludendorff's army on July 14, 1918. From that faithful day until the armistice, the 28th knew little rest and never saw a quiet sector. The story of the 28th Division in World War II begins when it was activated on 17 February 1941 at Camp Livingston, Louisiana. The division traveled to Fort Uniontown Gap, not far from here, for organization and training, and then they trained in the Carolinas, Virginia, Louisiana, Texas, and Florida. It went overseas on 8 October 1943, arriving in South Wales, where they began training for the invasion of northern France. The 28th Division landed at Normandy, France, on July 22nd, 1944. Inching their way forward across desperate opposition, The men took Persay on 1 August and Gathamo on 10 August. They began to roll north and east on 20 August, meeting light resistance except in La Neuburg, and on the 24th of August and on the 25th. After marching in the Paris Liberation Parade on August 26th, the morale of the personnel were high, and the division resumed the attack north of Paris in the vicinity of Saint-Denis and Le Bourg. It was again a matter of keeping up the race on the heels of the Germans, of the enemy, through and on to Belgium and Luxembourg. The first units of the division moved to the Siegfried Line, or West Wall, in Germany on September 10th. The only winner in the 28th Division who won the Congressional Medal of Honor was Francis J. Clark of Company K, 109th Infantry. And he received that for actions on and around 12 September 1944 at the Ore River near Colburn, Luxembourg. I was there before Christmas last year helping local historians try to determine where he crossed and where his unit crossed. And we figured out, based on documents that we had, that it was right there. It's a picture of a river. It doesn't mean much to you, but it means a lot to the people that I was with who were trying to determine the exact location because they wanted to erect a plaque, a monument, to he and his soldiers crossing at that point. And they had to get the landowners' permission, of course, to do that. So I was pleased to help them in that regard a little bit. By the way, his Medal of Honor was donated by his family, and it's on display at the 14 Gap Military Museum today, if you'd like to see it. So after stiff resistance from German defenders, casualties here were heavy, and the 28th Division was moved back to Elsenborn, Belgium, to receive some replacements. Here, it was possible to rotate infantry battalions on the line in order that they could bathe, change clothes, have some recreation, and also they started to experience their first cases of trench foot, which were administered to there. On September 29th, the division received orders to move into Aachen, Germany, in preparation for a planned First Army attack to seize the Rohr River dams on the way to Cologne and the heart of German heavy industry. On November 4th, they entered the dark, damp Hurtgen Forest. While fighting in the Normandy area was intense, nothing prepared those men for what they witnessed in the Hurtgen Forest. Private First Class Alfred Dupré, Company K, 3rd Battalion, 112th Infantry, recalled, quote, approaching Guermir we were brought into the grim reality of what may lie ahead. Dozens of vehicles were approaching us en route to the rear. They were loaded with the dead and wounded, close quote. The Germans had constructed pillboxes with interlocking fire and hidden machine gun nests, minefields, entrapments, barbed wire, etc. And the 28th Division soldiers were under constant artillery and mortar fire. The shells were designed, the fire was designed to burst in the treetops so that not only did the men experience the shrapnel from the rounds exploding, they experienced the splinters from the trees raining down here mixed with the shrapnel. So they had to fortify their foxholes and bunkers with heavy logs just to survive that. They were under constant fire, never ended. The 28th Infantry Division suffered 6,184 casualties, including more than 600 killed. Non-battle injuries like trench foot affected over 750 soldiers. The psychological toll was equally severe. They went into that battle, not enough rubber boots, not enough winter gear, not enough understanding of how to treat trench foot and what it was all about, thus the results of it. The relentless fire, artillery fire, freezing rain, and constant threat of ambush left many soldiers physically and mentally exhausted. Conditions in the Hurtgen Forest were so dire that basic self-care became impossible. Soldiers ate cold, spoiled meals and slept in waterlogged foxholes. It rained, it snowed, it was muddy, miserable. Communication lines were often destroyed by the artillery and mortar fire, leaving units isolated and without clear orders. Yet they fought on. By November 14th, the 28th Division was no longer a combat effective force and was sent to Luxembourg along the west bank of the Our River. The Allied command thought the area was a quiet sector. Men would rest and recuperate. They could think about Christmas and going home because their leaders told them the Germans were defeated and the war was going to be over soon. The Allied front extended approximately 80 miles. Leon touched a little bit about the units that were involved from the north to the south. With the 28th Division stretched along a 25-mile front on the west bank of the Our River. Now, for those of you who are really into military history at that period, you know that a typical division front during that time was planned to be 8 miles. Now they're in a 25-mile front. The division units were arrayed with the 112th in the north, bordered by the U.S. 106th Division, the 110th Regiment in the center, and the 109th in the south, bordered by the U.S. 9th Armored Division. Since the division could not maintain a continuous front for 25 miles, they established what they called strong points. And they were established at street intersections, church steeples, other key locations in villages, and along the road running from St. Vith to Dykirch that the soldiers called Skyline Drive because it resembled the road that runs through the Virginia mountains, which many of you maybe have driven on. And I've been on Skyline Drive in Luxembourg, and it's just like driving through the Virginia road, windy, up and down, a lot of trees, So the men rested and refitted, thinking about Christmas and going home. Their leaders told them that the Germans were defeated and the war was going to be over soon. However, while the men were resting, Hitler had different ideas for them. He thought that by committing his last military reserves in a frantic gamble, he could drive through Luxembourg and Belgium and capture the deep-water port of Antwerp. Why was Antwerp important? First of all, it was the only functioning deep-water port along the whole coast. If you've ever seen pictures of it, there's big cranes unloading cargo vessels and so on. Well, these mulberry harbors that the Allies had constructed along the Normandy beaches, they worked, but they were nothing in comparison to the assets that were available in a deep-water cargo port. If you look at pictures of Antwerp from those days, it would mirror any deep-water port we have now with the modern equipment. And they were capable of unloading very, very quickly and a lot of cargo. And so Hitler believed this would destroy the Allied coalition and cause them to negotiate an agreement to end the war. The area Hitler chose for his offensive was the Ardennes Forest, right through the center of the 28th Division sector, the main thrust. So shortly after 5 a.m., on December 16th, the thoughts of Christmas and going home came to an end. The German artillery barrage began along the entire 80-plus mile sector. The men did not realize it at the time, but it was the start of the Battle of the Bulge, or the Ardennes Offensive, as it's termed in Europe. The Germans knew they had to secure the limited road network through the forest for their tanks to drive toward Antwerp. Their plan called for them to reach the Clef River by the evening of the 16th. However, many of the roads and intersections were protected by the 28th Division strongpoints. Once they reached the bank of the Clef River, the Germans had an open shot at the road network that led into Bastogne and then on to Antwerp. According to General Heinz Cloet, the commander of the 26th Volksgrenadier Division, quote, "Success or failure of the entire operation depends on an incessant and stubborn drive westward and northeast. The forward waves of the attack must not be delayed or tied down by any force of resistance. Bastogne should fall on the second day of the offensive, or at least be encircled by then." Close quote. While the soldiers planted mines and other obstacles, in the 1st Battalion, 112th Sector, the Germans succeeded in penetrating between Company A and Company B. In the 3rd Battalion Sector, they penetrated the lines between Company I and K, overrunning the right platoon of Company I and K, or Company L rather, reaching the mortar position and the 3rd Battalion command post and a communication link. During the day, the Germans attacked with tanks and infantry and breached supporting positions, including kitchen areas. So now cooks were cooking eggs one minute, and they're getting in their rifle out the next minute, between cooking and trying to provide subsistence to the soldiers and fighting off the Germans. They weren't trained for that. I mean, everybody takes basic training. You fire your rifle, you have basic maneuver skills. But when you go off to your particular job skill, you're not focused on that type of fighting anymore. So everybody got into the action, no matter what their military occupation specialty was, MOS. These positions were initially held, and the Germans were repulsed. Frank Olson of Company A, 1st Battalion, remembered thinking, quote, "Oh, no, you don't. You're not going through here. We carried out the order they told us, stay to the end, and that's what we did," close quote. The men of the 112th held until December 18th, until the pressure from the Germans was so great, they were pulled back and attached to the 106th Division, protecting its left flank. In the 109th Sector, on the south, after the initial artillery barrage, strong German infiltrations were reported along the 2nd and 3rd Battalions front. Several strong German attacks were repulsed. 2nd Lieutenant Jacob P. Welk was awarded the Bronze Star for his action in Weiler. Then an anti-tank squad leader, Weiler and his gun squad were attached to Company I, which was located in a forward position along the battalion front. Although superior German forces encircled the town, he personally took control of an anti-tank gun and sent round after round of high explosive ammunition into the midst of the onrushing German infantry. Excuse me. On the 17th, the Germans fired more artillery at the 109th Sector, and still fighting ensued with the Germans being repulsed. So you see what's happening. The Germans are coming up, they're advancing, they're getting repulsed, they're retreating a little bit. An interesting note to this, by the way, when I was doing my research and reading some of the German documents, the German higher command told the lower commanders, if you experience sufficient resistance, don't fight it, go around it. They didn't listen. Many of them did not listen. They said, no, we're going to beat them, we're going to fight them. Well, so what happens when you do that? It chews up the clock. It chews up time, as Leon had alluded to earlier. Time is what this was all about. It was all about time so the Allies could react. Because, frankly, the Allies were surprised. Took them a while to, I'm talking about high command, took them a while to figure out what was going on here, And where are our troops? What are we going to move? What are we going to do? Who's ready? Those are the kind of things that are going through their heads, and maybe some of our speakers later will address that a little bit more, in a little more detail. So, as the pressure from the advancing Germans overwhelmed the men of the 109th, they had to withdraw on December 18th. In the middle of the 28th Division sector was the 110th Infantry Regiment. They occupied the largest and most tenuous line. For their plans to succeed, the Germans had to capture the east-west road network before the Allies had time to react. It was a must. They had to do it. Everybody knows you can't drive tanks through the middle of the forest. But there's roads. And those tanks were on those roads the first time they attacked, so they know they could do it, all right? And it's those same roads that they had to capture again. But this time, there's somebody standing in their way. There's strong points, there's machine gun nests, there's minefields, and all those things, tank traps, and all those things that the 28th Division and other units were able to establish, even though a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit over here, as opposed to one continuous front that you would see in some other actions. So the strong points and fighting positions were established to cover the east-west roads, which ran from the Ore River to Skyline Drive. Skyline Drive at that time was a fairly robust road. I mean, you could put a lot of traffic on it, and it was a clear shot from St. Vith to Dykirch. So they could move north and south to find other road networks, other roads, and move the armor further west. So at the beginning of the German attack, the 110th headquarters were located in Clairvaux, with companies located in other villages west of the Ore River. The mission of dislodging the 28th Division defenders from Skyline Drive was given to the German 26th Volksgrenadier Division and the 2nd Panzer Division. The 26th Volksgrenadier was to quickly cross the Ore River, and while engineers were bridging the river for the Panzer divisions to follow, they were to overrun the 110th Regiment and advance westward to Bastogne. In a small village of Weiler, Company I was in their defensive positions when the Germans advanced. A force of about 200 men were spotted approaching Weiler through a draw. With carbines and M1 rifles, the Americans ripped into the German infantry, causing them to take cover and withdraw. Again, Germans didn't expect a lot of this. Okay, so they're coming up. In some cases, they're marching in parade formation down the road, not expecting the resistance that they actually experienced. So at 8 a.m., Company B, 1st Battalion, reported they were being attacked by a German force of 70 men. By 8:50, the Americans saw about 300 Germans north and southwest of Montmartre, and they became engaged in a considerable short battle around Montmartre. The last communication with Company B was at 6:30 p.m. They were presumed lost. In Hochingen, by nightfall on the 17th of December, with their water gone, ammunition low, Captain William Jarrett of Company K, 110th Infantry, decided to surrender. They had held off the Germans for over 50 hours. Think about that. With almost nothing. 50 hours. Clairvaux was the main objective of the tank drive on Bastogne. Why? First of all, its strategic location along the road network, along the major highway to Bastogne, was imperative to the Germans to capture it. Had to capture it. Clairvaux should have fallen before noon on the 16th of December, according to the original German plan. Instead, the Americans continued to hold on the morning of the 17th. Despite intense artillery, mortar, small arms, and tank fire, and a scarcity of ammunition, the men of the 28th continued to fight there. Now, we're talking about a ragtag group of people in that castle, made up of cooks and clerks and a few infantry people and some engineers, some communications people. Not the kind of person you think is at the front of the battle, a highly trained infantry person, you know. Clairvaux was a scene of heavy fighting. Units of the 110th Regiment dug in against advancing tanks and the Panzer Grenadiers of the Wehrmacht 2nd Armored Division. A group made up of cooks, clerks, some infantrymen, led by Captain John Aiken, continued to defend the castle. They prevented German troops from taking the local main road network. It was not until the early afternoon of the next day that they had to surrender, following a German attack with phosphorus grenades, causing the castle to catch fire, and the German defenders were running out of ammunition. So you see this picture. Castle was very thick walls. I've been there. Probably, the walls are probably like this thick. But the roof is wood. So the Germans knew this. So they fired artillery grenades at the roof. They cut it on fire. And, you know, the fire came down through the castle. The men had no choice. What are they going to do? They had to leave it. By 5 a.m. on December 18th, a heavy artillery barrage fell on Constam, now defended by Headquarters Company and Company L of the 110th Infantry. 3 German infantry attacks were repulsed during the morning. During the Battle of the Bulge, outnumbered American troops put up fierce resistance in defending places like Kosingen, Monarch, Ruhr, Munhausen, Clairvaux. Attacking units of the German 5th Panzer Army were unable to take by storm the key road intersections required for that rapid advance to the port of Antwerp. So by the morning of December 19th, the entire 101st Airborne Division and other units had arrived in Bastogne, the day that the division headquarters in Wiltz finally fell to the German offensive. The 28th Division soldiers withdrew west, what was left of them, dug in and continued to support efforts in the Bastogne area until they were ordered to withdraw to France on December 20th, shortly before Bastogne was isolated by the German offensive. When the 28th withdrew from the front line, the division and attached units had sustained over 4,600 battle casualties and over 650 non-battle casualties. The men of the division who were left continued to fight until they were overrun, joined the Allied units, or were captured or forced to march through the cold snow to German POW camps. Even as the 101st Airborne fought to retain control of Bastogne, individual soldiers from the 28th Division filtered into the city from elsewhere on the battlefield, where they acted as the Allied Quick Response Force named Task Force Snafu. I'm not going to get into the what that acronym stands for. Somebody wants to know, you can see me later, okay? Or you may already know. So facing overwhelming German forces without sleep, without food, the soldiers of the 28th Division fought nonstop, often until the last bullet, until the last man. They delayed the German drive long enough for the Allies to send the 101st and other airborne and other units to the Bastogne area to bolster its defense. Had the 28th Division not upset the German timetable, it is likely that they would have captured Bastogne by the 18th, before the 101st got there. If the German logistics would have held up, and there's some debate as to whether they could have actually gotten to Antwerp anyway, because they were running out of fuel, they would have had a clear path to Antwerp. If they would have had the logistics support and met their timetable, they'd have probably made it to Antwerp. Cedric Foster was one of the top news analysts for a mutual broadcasting system during the war. Speaking from studios in Boston, WNAC studios in Boston, on January 19, 1945, he broadcast the following, quote, Morley Cassidy of the North American Newspaper Alliance, who is accredited to the United States 28th Infantry Division, excuse me, has told today for the first time the story of the 28th Division's heroic stand in the German breakthrough of last December. He said that it is the merest justice to declare that the Keystone 28th Division, under the command of Major General Norman D. Cota, deserves equal credit with the gallant 101st Airborne for stemming the German drive. 3 days before the 101st began its stand, the men of the 28th Division were taking the full brunt of von Rundstedt's mightiest offensive in Luxembourg. They were fighting desperately in hundreds of scattered battles against 9 German divisions. 9 German divisions, think about it. They had held so firmly that the German timetable had been completely thrown off. Bastogne was supposed to have been captured according to the German documents on the second day. It took days to surround it. The 101st Airborne was planted in Bastogne, and the flanks had been held by the 28th Division in an immortal stand, close quote. So while the German command did not reach its goal of capturing Antwerp, the Ardennes offensive inflicted heavy losses and delayed the Allied invasion. According to the United States Department of Defense, American forces suffered 89,500 casualties, including 19,000 killed, 47,500 wounded, and 23,000 missing in the Battle of the Bulge. The 28th Division soldiers' resolve and stand was nothing short of remarkable when you really look at it. From the inception of the battle, their ferocity took its toll on the opposing German forces. It embodied their unwavering commitment to their principles, the unshakable faith in their mission, and the valor that comes with putting oneself in harm's way for the greater good. The 28th, having doggedly fought in place using all available personnel and thrown the enemy's table off before withdrawing to Belgium on the 26th of December for reorganization, as its units had been badly mauled. After rest, receiving replacements and refitting, the 28th was tasked with another mission. During early January 1945, the division was charged with the defense of the Meuse River in Belgium to Verdun, France. At the end of November 1944, the German pocket of resistance formed in the French Alsace region, centered in the city of Colmar. The Colmar pocket consisted of a strength of 8 German divisions and a brigade of panzer tanks. A combined force of French and American armies were initially unsuccessful in closing the pocket. Battle plans were soon made, and on the 19th of January, the 28th was in action again in the northwestern section of the pocket in the Kaisberg Valley, supporting the beleaguered 3rd Infantry Division, which had been holding there since late November 1944. The 28th advanced westward and pressed steadily toward the city of Colmar. In less than 10 days, they reduced the pocket by half, and Hitler gave the order in the early morning of the 29th of January for a partial retreat of his troops in the north sector of the pocket. By the 2nd of February, the 28th had cleared Colmar's surrounding areas, and the French 5th Armored Division led the way into town. On 9 February, the final organized German troops in the Alsace region were pushed back to the Rhine. The 28th Division led the color guard at the Colmar Victory Parade on February 8th, 1945, and the division's 109th Regiment received the French Croix de Guerre from Charles de Gaulle himself for their actions. Further advances to the east across the Eel River and Rhino-Rhone Canal to the west of the Rhine followed, and so by the 23rd of February, the division was in line along the Ofe River. March 6th was the jumping off in an attack which carried the 28th to the Aar River and other places in Germany, and the resistance fell very rapidly as they continued on eastward. Many prisoners and large stores of enemy weapons and equipment and ammunition were taken as a result. So the division crossed the Rhine and occupied an area south of the Ruhr pocket, awaiting a possible southward drive by the German forces that were trapped in the pocket. Early in April, the division moved west of the Rhine and took up occupation duties in the area north of Aachen along the Holland-German border. 2 weeks later came a move to a permanent occupation area in the Saar-Rhineland-Palatinate. Early in July, the division started a redeployment to the United States and reassembled at Camp Shelby, Mississippi, and was inactivated on 12 December 1945. The 28th Infantry Division was on the front line for 196 days of combat, sustaining 26,286 total casualties, or 175% of their assigned strength. 175% of their assigned strength. There weren't that many left from the original training in Wales, when you think about this, numbers. 15,000 approximate division strengths, a little less than 15,000 maybe for an infantry division. How many times it turned over? So it wasn't the same soldiers, it wasn't the same people who trained together in Wales. Oftentimes the replacements would come in and they were committed by their leaders that didn't even know their names. Didn't know anything about them. So, you, go there. You are now over there. That's how it had to be. That's what it was. They didn't get a chance to assimilate, to know each other, to develop that group camaraderie that we always talk about. Why do soldiers fight? Well, it's because of camaraderie. It's because they know each other. That's true, but they didn't know each other. So there had to be some other reason. The sacrifices of the 28th Division remind us of courage, resilience, and unity, and there are timeless virtues. In a world still grappling with conflict and division, their stories teach us the enduring power of standing firm for what is right, of working together against overwhelming odds, and holding on to hope even in the darkest moments. These lessons are vital today, as they were 80 years ago, and hopefully will guide us to the future. So today, as we mark the 80th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge and the sacrifices made by many American soldiers and people on the home front, and the sacrifices that they all endured should be honored, and the legacy of their courage, sacrifice, and unyielding dedication for freedom needs to be remembered. The young men who fought so long ago stood firm in the darkest hour. Their resolve turned the tide of history. It is now our responsibility to carry their story forward. So let their courage, inspire us to confront the challenges of our time within the same determination. Let their sacrifice remind us of the value of freedom and the cost of preserving it. As we leave here today, let us not only remember the deeds that these soldiers did, but let's share their stories, educate the next generation, uphold the principles for which they fought. For in doing so, we honor their memory, not just with our words, but with our actions.